Hello, and welcome to our roundtable discussion, Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, Its Rise and Our Responses. Women in International Security, WIIS, Global is proud to host this event with the Embassy of Liechtenstein. My name is Karen Johnston, and I'm the Research Director of WIIS. WIIS is a non-governmental organization that promotes gender equality by helping women advance as leaders in the international peace and security sector. For over 35 years, our unique global membership organization has supported professional growth opportunities for women, led gender equality research projects and policy engagement initiatives, and nurtured a community of powerful security advocates, expert leaders, and mentors. Our network spans nearly 50 countries across 6 continents and includes 15,000 members who are committed to closing the gender gap worldwide. If you're interested in learning more about our organization and joining us as a member, please visit our website. The link will be in the chat. Our event today aims to discuss the various technological solutions for combating gender inequality and gender-based violence. I'm grateful to His Excellency Georg Sparbe, Ambassador of Liechtenstein to the United States, for his strong support of WIIS's mission, and I welcome him to our discussion today. And I would like to thank our esteemed panelists, Weiwei Nu, Sarah Wahedi, and Anna Nemtsova. Finally, I thank you who joined us here today to be part of our discussion on gender and technology and women's agency to raise the profile of the issues facing women and girls and other risk groups in Myanmar, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. I am now delighted to welcome and introduce His Excellency Georg Sparbe, Ambassador of the Principality of Liechtenstein to the United States. Prior to becoming appointed ambassador to the United States in 2021, Ambassador Sparbe held the position of Deputy Permanent Representative of Liechtenstein to the United Nations in New York since January 2017. His portfolio included disarmament, peace and security, and political issues. I turn it over to you, Mr. Ambassador, and look forward to hearing your remarks.
Well, thank you and welcome everyone. Thank you very much, Karin, for the warm welcome and introduction, and thank you to WIIS for co-hosting this event on the role of technology in gender-based violence. It is a very topical discussion to have, and I'm glad that WIIS is once again at the forefront of it, and I'm really grateful to the stellar panel that we're going to have the privilege to listen to in a minute. We, of course, all know very well the sad reality that 1 out of 3 women face gender-based violence in their lifetime. What we do not know that well is what forms such violence can take through new technologies, how physical and psychological violence can be triggered, amplified, and targeted through new technologies, and how vulnerabilities can increase as a result. We've seen a lot of that during the pandemic, which has moved millions of lives online with often little protection from abuse or exploitation. And at the same time, the pandemic has also restricted many people to the privacy of often violent homes, and thus deprived the most vulnerable to gender-based violence from the safe space of work, school, or the public sphere in general. And this was rightfully called the shadow pandemic, the pervasiveness of domestic violence. Truly horrific to think what that means for the millions of Afghan women right now in their confinement to private space and predominantly excluded from access to technology. And I do look forward to learning more about that from our discussion, but also to what extent technology may provide a way out of the limited physical space to the resources of the digital realm for education and for social exchange. While the absence of technology or unequal access can increase gender-based violence and vulnerabilities, for sure, the use and application of new technologies can facilitate such violence as well. The role of Facebook, for example, to incite violence against the Rohingya is now very clearly established. The fake news, the dehumanization, the incitement, they have all systematically been used by those who sought to instigate the most harrowing violence against women, men, and children with genocidal intent. And there is no doubt that we need to learn the right lessons, including clear pathways to accountability. The rapid emergence of openly accessible generative artificial intelligence makes that even more urgent. And we see a debate going on both in Europe and in the US at this stage. Just last week, the European Parliament adopted a position on AI. Those debates often center around the need to develop new standards, new regulation, and new principles of engagement with technology. But what is sometimes forgotten is that we already have far-reaching obligations to ensure human rights standards are respected both online and offline. There's a clear obligation under international law to fight gender-based violence, whether it happens in the physical or in the digital sphere. CEDAW's General Comment 35 is very clear on that. Gender-based violence occurs in all spaces and spheres of human interaction, and part of our obligation is that we give ourselves the right tools to actually address it. Technology always also has the potential to strengthen the agency of people, and we saw a number of interesting developments how that can work when we look at the responses, for example, of the people in Ukraine, in particular the Ukrainian women, who have found measures to address the illegal Russian aggression through digital means to strengthen their agency, to strengthen their way to react to the hardships that this illegal war has brought about. And I really do look forward to the panel discussion to look more in detail at this dimension of the debate as well. And with that, dear Karin, I'm handing it over back to you, and I really look forward to listening to the panel discussion. Thank you all for participating today.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador Sparber, for your remarks about this really important topic. Our topic today, of course, then deals with the critical issue of the relationship between the nature of technology and its impact on gender issues and on women's agency. Our technology and gender program examines this multifaceted link between gender and technology, which is growing increasingly complex alongside the rapid development and deployment of new forms of technology, as the ambassador indicated. Technology, as we know, can be a weapon to uphold harmful gender norms, but it also can be a powerful tool in the fight for gender equality. So how technology is applied and used is one of the most important questions to ask, since the dual nature of technology brings these benefits as well as harm, especially to vulnerable populations in conflict and fragile contexts. So again, we hear a lot about the negative aspects, but today we want to look at the other side of the coin, how technology empowers women, can even fight against gender-based violence, and how women can harness technology to give them the ability to overcome the many hurdles they face. We will look again at the situation in Afghanistan, Myanmar, and Ukraine to discuss these questions. The topic in our discussions builds on the theme of the 2023 Commission on the Status of Women, which was innovation and technological change, to highlight how technology can increase women's agency in decision-making, leadership, and collective action. And I would like to introduce our speakers with a short biographical sketch. Weiwei Nu is the founder and the executive director of the Women's Peace Network, an organization that advocates for the rights of marginalized women in Burma, especially in Rakhine State, and seeks to build peace and mutual understanding between Burma's ethnic communities. Nu has been a recipient of multiple awards for her work, including the 2014 N Peace Awards, the 2015 Democracy Courage Tributes, and the 2018 Hillary Rodham Clinton Award. Nu received her bachelor's degree in law from the University of Yangon in Myanmar and her master's degree in law from the University of California, Berkeley. She previously served as a visiting scholar with the Human Rights Center at the University in Berkeley. Sarah Wahedi is a technologist and human rights activist who has made security and safety her life's mission. Sarah was named one of Time Magazine's Next Generation Leaders and one of BBC's 100 Women of 2022. Sarah was among MIT Technology Review's innovators under 35 in 2022 for her work democratizing access to information for Afghans. Sarah previously worked at the Office of the President of Afghanistan, responsible for supporting social development policy and projects across the country. She's completing her studies in data science and human rights at Columbia University. And Anna Nemtsova is a correspondent for the Daily Beast covering news in Eastern Europe. Her work also has appeared in the Washington Post and Politico, Foreign Policy, and The Atlantic, among many others. She has been covering Ukraine since 1999. She's the winner of the 2012 Persephone Meal Fellowship and a 2015 recipient of the prestigious International Women's Media Foundation's Courage and Journalism Award. So we have an enormous group of talented individuals who will give us, I think, one of the most insightful ways of understanding these issues. And so, if I may just begin with the first question, to help give us context, to describe to us the situation as it stands today for women in your country. In your experience, for what purposes can technology actually be a powerful tool for women? Can you give us examples of how using different types of technology tools has helped women find solutions or reduce vulnerability? And I'd like Weiwei Nu to start us off on our discussion. Thank you, Weiwei Nu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karen, and thank you again for bringing Burma and in these discussions. The situations of women in Burma is extremely dire. Every one of them is now under threat of the Burmese military. Since its attempted coup 2 years ago, the military has committed arbitrary arrest, detention, torture, killing, airstrikes, scorched earth campaigns, and many other brutal attacks against civilians, among them women, girls, and LGBTQI+ members have been particular risks of rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery, and other forms of sexual and gender-based violence. The military is committing its crimes, in Burma's growing areas of armed conflicts, as well as prisons and detention center. According to Burmese civil society groups, many of us, the military has arbitrarily arrested and detained over 4,600 women in over 2 years. Time and times again, these atrocities have been reported as amounting to crimes against humanity, war crimes, according to the OHCHR and the UN Special Rapporteur on the situations of human rights in Myanmar and other key international bodies. They add to the military's decade-long use of rape as a weapon of war when committing crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide against ethnic and religious minorities, including Rohingya. Last year, the US government, in fact, determined the atrocities committed against the Rohingya as the crimes against humanity and genocide. It is important to recognize the reality of Burma's human rights and humanitarian catastrophe to truly support and protect its women. Amid the nationwide catastrophe, technology has become a vital tool for Burma's women to exercise their rights and agency. We can see this by their use of digital tools to stand on the front line of the Burmese pro-democracy movement. Women are using Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms to organize protests for justice and accountability, conduct research to document the military's crimes, and publish their reporting on widespread sexual violence in Burma. Women human rights defenders are using Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, and Facebook Messenger to communicate with each other, especially for people who have been forced to exile. According to the UNHCR, over 2.9 million people have been forcibly displaced from Burma. More than 1.2 million of them are refugees. It is important to recognize how technology have been lifeline to these women's activisms, not only since the attempted coup, but for decades before. Ethnic and religious minority women leading civil society have long relied on social media platforms for their communication, advocacy, and documentation. For example, my organization's Women's Peace Network continue to heavily rely on digital tools to conduct campaign advocacy, documentations and communications with key international and domestic stakeholders. Women Peace Network's award-winning My Friend campaign from 2015 rely on Facebook and other social media platforms to build harmony among Burmese youth and combat discriminations and racism. This role of technology is positive compared to what technology did to facilitate the Burmese military's decades-long atrocities. Indeed, we must remember now how Facebook amplify hate speech and disinformations against Rohingya, and how that led to the genocide in 2017. And today, the Burmese military is using the same Facebook and Telegram and other digital tools to conduct doxing campaign against women activists. I myself have for years received rape and death threat online for my human rights activism, especially on Rohingya. And I have reported abusive posts and comments multiple times on Facebook, but they have never been addressed. Therefore, on top of these, on top of recognizing the pros of the technology for women, we must also address its shortcoming immediately to make it safer. Tech companies must regulate their platform with actions to protect their users' rights and security. They must, at the very least, take actions against the account of Burmese military and pro-military militias. It's well known that the military is weaponizing AI and deep fake against the women, especially outspoken and prominent women human rights defenders. In this context, it is very unfortunate that the Twitter, on one of the main platforms for human rights awareness, abolish its human rights team and make payment conditions for verification. I hope that Twitter will make it clear to improvement to ensure that its platform will be accessible and safe to all users. Technology can be helpful if the international community effectively regulate it and its users are provided enough resources to benefit from it, or else, as the case of Myanmar tell us, the technology can be used to divide and destroy the community. Thank you once again for your time, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow and distinguished panelists throughout our discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for that very insightful spectrum of issues and also responsibilities that we have for Facebook and being involved as well. So Sarah, please give us your assessment of how the situation is in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Dr. Johnston, and to Ambassador Shbaba. Thank you so much for having me today. I would like to preface this to say that the world has become very accustomed to the Taliban providing limited to no space for women in the public space. But what the world doesn't understand is that impetus and that mindset also extends to the online space. And we've seen obviously the public space restrictions in terms of schools and employment and women's gardens, and these are very sporadic. So the Taliban has been quite calculated in terms of allowing women to utilize public spaces in some contexts to ensure that the world isn't taken aback. Of course, we have been quite shocked, but they have been maneuvering between restrictions in the public space because they know that the world is able to monitor them. But in terms of the online spaces, it's much more nuanced than that, just due to the fact that the notion of a woman being online has become a very deeply cultural issue. An example of this is a recent article in Rukhsana Media, which is an all Afghan women-led news platform, which recently interviewed a mother in Afghanistan with her two sons who have become extremely acquainted with the Talib Deobandism or Talib mentality, where their younger sister was holding a phone and she was beaten severely with a phone charger. And the reason for that was that it was seen as rude for their sister to be holding a phone. And this is something that we have seen throughout similar articles of families viewing the mobile phone as something that women shouldn't be having access to. And that is due to this permeating sense of a dangerous world out there that can affect young women and girls, and this is something that should be taken away from them or restricted only to the most urgent needs. And I think that that's also a reason why we're seeing a lag in terms of online access to education. There is still a concern in terms of mobile usage. So one is the context of a cultural connotation that the Taliban is trying to press, which is to limit women and girls online. But another more positive aspect is how women have been and girls have been fighting back on this. So every protest we've been seeing online through videos and through photos, all of the articles, all of the movements we've been seeing by women protesting, holding signs, singing songs, reading poetry, have all been through mobile phones. So all of the protests that we have seen have not been organized through underground meetings. They've all been organized through Signal, through Telegram, and WhatsApp. So this is one of the ways that has been quite unprecedented, really, of how women used to access public spaces to meet and to organize movements. And now they've all been moved online. So most of these amazing movements that we've been seeing in the public spaces have been organized online. So it's a very, very important platform for Afghan women to be able to access. And the other aspect is women involved in terms of media and journalism. So two of the most influential, I would say, platforms in terms of women's stories is Roshana Media, led by the amazing Zahra Joya, and also Zan Times, which stands for the Women Times, which is led by Zahra Nader. So they're two amazing women who have been focusing on providing a platform for Afghan women to speak out, to share their stories. And the amazing thing is that their stories have now been used in the UN Security Council and a lot of other important platforms in terms of using these stories, not only as precedent for how to approach a solution, but also to get the word out from Afghan women themselves and to provide them the agency to share their stories. So it's been quite encouraging in terms of the ways that women have been able to speak out, but there's still much more that we can do in terms of a grander scale and to have as many women voices collated. I currently manage a startup called Ihtisab, which is a cognate use of words translating to accountability and transparency, and a feature that we're working on with a Berlin-based startup called Sing Network, which is led by Suli Kalik. We're working on an emergency safety card, a feature within the Ihtisab app, which would be shadowed as a calculator or as a menstrual app. And that feature would change daily, where women are going to be able to utilize these emergency safety cards in issues of domestic violence, violence in urban spaces, urban mobility, where we'll be able to engage with women in terms of limitations to their freedoms and their rights, and how to collate that data and to have a much more macro perspective of the daily Afghan women's movements and usages of the urban space and the online space. So this is something that we're very excited about and we've been working quite hard on. So this is something to basically facilitate member states and donors and agencies like the UN to be able to have the data at a much more expansive level in terms of how we can create projects and build important solutions that are much more sustainable and have more daily Afghan women's experiences at their helm, so they can use that data to provide much more robust, sustainable solutions. So this feature hopefully will be available by the end of the year. And we've been working hard to ensure that women can access it safely. And the goal really here is to engage with women, provide them emergency information, and to have them engage with us about what information that they need. So that's something that we're working on at Ihtisab to be able to support women. But I would say in terms of the use of technology, we're seeing, although the economy is quite dire right now in Afghanistan, the New York Times has cited that there are now 20 million active mobile users in Afghanistan. So this is something that we can utilize. This is an important update in terms of women's access to technology, and is something that we need to work on in terms of making sure that we have Afghan women's voices at the forefront of every conversation that we have. And technology is going to be the main platform for Afghan women. As we've seen in the public space, it's almost impossible now to actually stand up and to get your voice out. And this is a much more safe, an alternative route, although protests are incredibly important, but this is something that we can utilize for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that invaluable information and insight. And Anna, please give us your views and your impressions and how it looks in the Ukraine for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karen Johnson. Thank you, everybody. In 2016, I was in Yangon reporting a profile story about WIIS. And so many years later, thanks to technology, we are all on the same panel, which is a miracle. And of course, my heart hurts for Afghani women so much because I was reporting stories for the Chronicle of Higher Education in Kabul, from Kabul University, about women coming back to higher education, and devastating news from Afghanistan, of course. Ukraine is torn by this war all over the country. Women have been suffering a lot because men cannot leave the country under the martial law. Women have to take care of children. Women have to evacuate themselves and kids and their families from war-affected areas. They have to run. They have to figure out where they go for a shelter. And in the beginning, we had a big percent of miscarriages. I reported the story from Odessa. Doctors said up to 20% of increase. Women just could not bear the war. Pregnant women were either losing the babies or had early labor, so a preterm labor. And technology now is being used for women, for pregnant women. There are bots called I Will Be a Mother that inform women, and information is everything today in Ukraine. About the shelters, where to go, which hospital to run to in case of emergency. Women in Ukraine are amazing. They organize unbelievable NGOs, and they lead groups, and they then network, they spread information, they investigate crimes, as there were dozens of women raped by Russian military. There is a group led by women called The Reckoning. And it is a group of Ukrainian journalists who educate other reporters on how to investigate crime. And they use all sorts of technologies, including what we've used before for our investigations, the cameras, city cameras, and all sorts of social media videos to pin down the crimes and criminals. Unfortunately, more than 2,000 women have been killed since the full-scale war, and over 500 children died in Ukraine. I was a victim of violence myself twice. I was abducted in 2014 and 2015 in eastern Ukraine. And at the time, we didn't have any technology to inform our editors about where we were, our location. Back in Iraq, journalists were using a device called Pocket Buddy. It was just a button that you push so your editors and your colleagues know where you were abducted. At the moment, journalists are much smarter. We are sharing our locations via WhatsApp or on a program called Live 360, which was originally invented for parents to track down their children. And now reporters are using it to share information about their locations. Women reporters, by the way, there are dozens of victims in my profession. Dozens of journalists have been killed, more than 40 in Ukraine. It's a terrible figure. But considering the overall disaster and millions of people being displaced, journalists are playing a very, very important role. And we still go to the field and we try to report as many stories as possible. But what happens to us? We burn out. So psychologically, journalists, especially women journalists who have children, are very, very burned down on this war. So I created a project called Breather. And thanks to Weatherman Foundation, I was able to take women journalists out of Ukraine for a breather in Portugal. And thanks to technologies, we were able to organize Zoom conferences with psychologists to help women who needed to talk with a psychologist, and just, you know, see the ocean and take a breather and create a program which is very popular among journalists. We've helped more than 50 women and their children in Portugal. But women still need a lot more information. And of course, in areas most affected by the war, where there is no Wi-Fi, no electricity, no way to charge your phone, people have just no chance to share the information. So what to do? People are very exhausted from air raids that happen every single night. But once again, thanks to technology, if you have your phone charged, if you have electricity, you're able to go on various Telegram bots or channels, or use a program we journalists use called Deep State Map, and analyze the situation. So every mother, every wife, daughter, they know which Telegram channels to use in their area, and see what is flying their way, whether it's a drone or whether it's a missile, and what to do, whether to take your child to run to a bomb shelter or just go and hide between two thick walls. And that's what happened to Julia, a mother who was bombed in her house in Kherson, and her daughter, 5-year-old daughter, Alisa. They moved, thanks to the Telegram channel, they moved to the hallway and they were hiding there. If they didn't, they would have been dead today. Alisa, the girl, lost her eye, and thanks to technologies, to networking and volunteer groups, I found out about it. I found Alisa in the hospital and let Weatherman Foundation know. We evacuated the girl and her family to Miami Hospital. So networking and these Telegram channels, they help us a lot to find out about women in trouble and help them. But unfortunately, the latest news, you have probably been following the news about the terrible flood that affected dozens and dozens of little villages and towns and in the south of Ukraine and Kherson region, where thousands of people were in the water. And as for the occupied territory, my recent piece in the Atlantic, I explained what happened to the Russia-occupied territories. Nobody was able to come and save those people. Neither ICRC or United Nations were capable of saving people from Russia-occupied territories, and no technologies helped the victims. Will have terrible aftermath. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And if I could just ask a couple of very specific questions to our individual speakers. I'm interested, Weiwei, in talking about the women and children who are particularly vulnerable in the refugee camps. What are their most urgent needs, and can technology and these technological tools in those circumstances, in those situations, help give women more ways to provide for their families and protect them?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So in the situations, I mean, in the context of refugees and deteriorating situations in the refugee camps, specifically in Bangladesh and across the border, women and children actually bear the brunt of it. And none of them still have any reliable access to education, employment, healthcare, proper shelter, and other basic needs and livelihood. Specifically, Rohingyas' access to food is now under threat. With the World Food Programme's recent ration cut to $8, just $8 per person per month. At the same time, Rohingya women and girls are growing risks of sexual violence and other targeted abuses by extremely patriarchal and misogynistic militant group and gangs in the camp. All of these conditions have posed a disproportionate number of Rohingya women and children to risk human trafficking, modern-day slavery, to escape the camps, take on this deadly sea journey, and risk disappearance and death. Last year was the deadliest year of the Rohingya at sea, and according to the UNHCR. Therefore, the need of the Rohingya women and children are multifaceted. And recognizing that these refugees are victims and survivors of genocide, it is hard to highlight the most urgent of their needs. We need bold and transformative international actions for their survival, more than just access to technological tool. On the other hand, in a practical sense, I can see technology, especially the internet, being used to help support Rohingya in other ways. They can include improving Rohingyas' access to informal and online educations and other skill-building opportunities, documentations and reporting on genocide and other crimes, and effort to preserve our language and culture as well. Social media platform can also help Rohingya refugees to communicate with one another, such as family members remaining in Rakhine State and in other host countries. Personally, I have relied on these tools to communicate with my families and loved ones, gather information and evidence on their situations from them, and strengthen my own advocacy internationally and on social media. Ultimately, by facilitating my community's communication, it is safe to say that technology has helped strengthen our unity as a people and hope for a better future. And there are many other examples these days. We're seeing growingly that when women have access to their telephone, they can actually record their life and what's happening around them. A lot of them become photographers or poets using these telephone devices they have, and they're posting on social media and communicating with wider international community. However, for the refugees to be able to use technology, their situations must drastically improve. We can expect victims and survivors of genocide confined in squalid camp at risk of life-threatening abuses to use tech as effective as other users. The Rohingyas struggle for survival. Technology is indeed a privilege or luxury that fuel the international community's exclusions of them. We see this from Rohingya women refugees, lack of access to laptop, telephone, phones, and other devices that are norms to many. I have also heard that in refugee camps, Rohingyas' laptops are being seized, and they must be at least provided. I believe they must be at least provided with the telephone and Wi-Fi access. For technology to be truly effective, its equitable access must be achieved. Therefore, the international community must supplement its measures to build digital tools to provide conditions for the most vulnerable. And that means addressing the root causes of the atrocities, including genocide. And I would thus like to take this opportunity to call upon countries and government to urgently take concrete and comprehensive actions to protect Rohingya refugees and bring them justice and accountability, their safe, voluntary, sustainable, and dignified return to home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may ask Sarah, we were interested also again on in response to the Taliban's ban on girls' education. We've seen the rise of virtual schooling. While these efforts are essential and must be supported, it's important to recognize they're not long-term solutions. And so again, how can we harness the power of technology and apply it to feasible long-term solutions to counter gender-based violence. You've mentioned some of it before, so very shortly, if you could just perhaps give another couple of examples, that would be really great. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Johnston. I think right now the main concern that we have is a lot of the projects that are being implemented in Afghanistan have very little data to support their projects. And I've been able to consult on a few of them. I've been able to view a few of them, but a lot of them are using data which is older, which is from the previous Afghan government, and it's much more different now. So one is, I think with education, it's a bit more different because of course, education has a very physical space that women and girls must take back. But in terms of gender-based violence, we've seen technology being used across the world in terms of supporting women and how to deal with gender-based violence. But I would say that right now, the main thing for us is to understand really what's going on in Afghanistan and to be able to provide a very robust method of being able to understand what's happening. And of course, UN agencies and many other platforms are trying to work on having a direct connection with women through hotlines and through text message systems to get women to be able to provide their stories or report instances of gender-based violence. But the concern is, and one of a recent project that I had flagged was that the Taliban it's been confirmed, is able to monitor text messages now. We are very much aware of this. So the use of smartphones is incredibly important because it provides that end-to-end encryption where we're able to gather these stories and these sentiments and reports in a way that is safe and manageable. And like I had mentioned, in our design, if we're able to design it in a way that is safe for a woman to access, that's all the more better. So providing much more innovative, nuanced methods to approach solutions to gender-based violence is integral. And I think that it just requires us to target the situation at hand and to work within these parameters rather than the ones that we've had prior in the last government. And that's still the kind of precedent and evidence that we're using to design these programs and projects and solutions. And that's just not sustainable because we need to understand what's happening now and have that work in tandem and in parallel with the solutions that we're trying to create in terms of gender-based violence in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and if I could now turn to Anna, a couple of things. You've mentioned sort of how female journalists are using technology tools to their advantage and protection. And if you have a couple of other examples, that would be great. But I'm also interested in just asking, you have also in your work seen where women in areas of communities have limited access to technology. And so how can women in those circumstances also be supported? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a very good question. And of course, for women journalists, technology played a very important role during this war. We were focusing on investigating crimes committed against women. And it was often the secure communication, the rules of how to secure the communication in these situations when women didn't want to make their stories public, they didn't want to share them, but we still needed to get the record. And of course, often off record, women needed information about how to secure their ways of communication. Technologies, internet especially, of course, was the key thing during covering of this war. Wherever we came after the deoccupation, people asked for Wi-Fi. The first thing they asked for, before the food, before water, they needed to get in touch with their families. They needed to know exactly what was happening to their loved ones. And Starlink was a big game changer. When journalists were able to bring Starlinks to the square of Kherson after months and months of occupation, you might have seen the photographs of people, crowds of people around Starlink, all on their cell phones. Finally, they were able, after a long blackout, to be in touch with their loved ones. And that was a big story, of course. But as I mentioned earlier, we were abducted, we were detained, lifted back in 2014, 2015, when this war started. Russian militia arrested, detained journalists, took them to basements, beat them, and very few of us had a chance to inform our friends or our editors before that happened. Years later, even now, 9 years later, it's been 9 years of this war. It's scary to realize that. We still don't have any emergency buttons. We still don't have any devices that all women reporters who get, threatened or lifted at checkpoints could use to inform their editors or their friends. We just help each other, and journalists are a very good and supportive community. I would like to use 2 examples for you to understand how technologies can both harm and help women. So in one of the situations, there were 3 journalists in the town of Melitopol, which was occupied by Russian military in the early days of the war, and they were detained. They worked for a small regional website. So their friends and colleagues on the Ukraine-controlled territory, they immediately blocked their access to the website. So the 3 journalists just told the Russian interrogators, see, we don't even have access to this website anymore. And they were not arrested for a long time. But in the other case, a woman journalist was arrested for her messages, for her little post on Facebook. She posted her husband's photographs in a national embroidered shirt, and that was enough of a reason for Russian interrogators to charge her with extremism. So she's now facing many years in prison just because she did not clean up her Facebook page. So that information was not obvious, that knowledge was not obvious to women journalists in the beginning of the war. Nobody knew how quickly and how thoroughly they had to clean their social media pages of all the information that was related to their Ukrainian identity. And that is actually a sign of genocide, because it was purely their Ukrainian identity that was the problem. So just to finish my legal argument here, I would like to see more technologies helping journalists in emergency situations. And even with all the amount of training we go through now we have a lot of programs for hostile environment, for how to rescue each other and provide primitive medical aid to wounded people. We still need some device that would inform our community, our editors, about the emergency SOS button.
Thank you. Thank you. If I could just ask a general question, one of the things, again, where that's important is finding other advocates, finding other organizations and individuals who can help in these circumstances, and building sort of these networks and working with civil society organizations is one of the very critical aspects. And so if anyone of the 3 speakers, what kind of policy recommendations or actions do you think sort of work in terms of working with civil society organizations, finding other sort of organizations that are willing to help you? How do you feel that, is there something lacking in sort of the connections that you need in order to get the information, in order to get the technology, in order to get some of the laptops or the critical equipment that you might need? If anyone has any thoughts on that.
If I may, I think it really depends on the situations. For example, women human rights defenders in the refugee camps or in the conflict-affected area, in a marginalized situation, so in a poor country, may not have access to even telephone or computer. And I think identifying those basic needs and being able to provide them with the necessary equipment they required is essential. So I think that will be immensely valuable to the field. And that's one area. And otherwise, for the civil society, I think if there is resources allocations for the safety, including digital safety of the women human rights defenders, would be necessary. Often these are not considered as needs or as important, so we often neglect them. When in situations of urgency, then we don't know what resources we rely on to have our safety on computer or on laptop, or the safety that or the risks that they face based on the online attack and attacks and other forms of intimidations, the risks that translate to the offline. How do we necessarily secure ourselves offline, right? So those kind of emergency allocations of resources for digital offline and online safety it will be very, very important and helpful, I think, often even if we undermine or dismiss them as needs. And thirdly, around having, I think, overall global regulations for the digital platforms is necessary. We still don't have anything that can be reliable or effective yet. So, but otherwise, I think if there is kind of like bodies or mechanisms that can help mitigate, kind of like guide through the women's human rights defenders how to take precautionary steps on what do we do, different steps that we need, rather than individual resources, but also a broader network or mechanisms of resources for the larger women's human rights defenders community to be able to effectively rely on. Right now, there are like some organizations who provide, for example, safety or relocation support, urgent support, right? But then even those urgent supports are not very accessible for a lot of the women's human rights defenders, and they have to provide a lot of evidences that actually include that doesn't actually include online threat that they cannot tangibly show, right? So I think there is a secure mechanisms and system that women in general, human rights defenders in general, and organizations can rely on available. That would be great. Maybe Liechtenstein can help develop such a tool with other allies. That would be, I think, very, very helpful as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And this leads into, I think, for me would be just sort of a general final thoughts for us as we move into the last couple of minutes. Just to close our discussion, I just wanted to ask each of you what you think is, again, the most important task that has to be done to help women and girls in your country. And I think, are you hopeful or are you worried? Just very short answers, but very important questions. And if I could ask maybe Sarah to begin.
Sure. Thank you very much. I guess I'll just answer both your previous question, Dr. Johnston, and this current one. Right now, the main focus for us at Ihtisab and other startups or technologists who are working in the space of gender-based violence, I would say, is agencies must work with local stakeholders. I'm seeing time and time again, foreign contractors with million-dollar budgets who are lacking sustainability, who come to Afghanistan and build something and it lasts for 6 months. I've been working in this field for 6 years now, and I have seen them fail time and time again. And our Afghan-led team, Afghan-based, has been working with a $20,000 budget every year, and we've been online since the country collapsed. So we are a sentiment. There are so many other groups like Ihtisab across the world who are able to build local solutions within their own countries. And I would urge and impress anyone listening today who has those connections to reach out to local stakeholders who are working on gender-based violence, because we know our communities best and we know how to approach them. So that would be the main thing, is that UN agencies need to focus on, or any other local NGOs or member states need to focus on, how do they research and look into local startups or innovators or NGOs who work, or CSOs who work on this and needs to meet them and to engage with them. And the second thing is that I'm incredibly hopeful. I think that technology knows no bounds, and there is no limitation with technology. In the context of Afghanistan, people kept telling me that we're going to see a complete digital divide or a complete backout. We are seeing women, girls, the Afghan youth fight back and figure out how to get their hands on a smartphone or a mobile phone. They are aware that the world is moving forward and the youth are not going to be moving back, especially women and girls. So they know that the phone and the mobile phone or laptops or whatever it may be is going to be their solution and their way towards freedom and their access to education and to their fundamental human rights. So we need to catalyze on that movement and support Afghan women and girls in the context of technology. And there are so many solutions, as the other esteemed panelists have mentioned. There are so many different ways that we can approach this. For example, in the Ukraine, Starlink changed everything. For Afghanistan, it would be exactly the same thing. So it's just a matter of these connections and these linkages. For us, Starlink would be the absolute game changer for us, and especially in terms of the threats the Taliban has been making about limiting access to the internet whenever they don't like something. That will completely change if we have access to universal internet. That would really make all the difference. So it's really about having those connections, and I'm incredibly hopeful we are only going to be moving forward.
Thank you. Anna, if I could ask you.
So I've been writing about violence against women, domestic violence, wars since '99, when I first started covering the war in Chechnya. So I've done dozens and dozens of stories about women victims of violence from at least 23 countries where I covered violence. So, but what we see in Ukraine today is a completely unique story, because men journalists cannot leave the country, and women journalists have to take care of both their children if men have been drafted, and report stories. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of Ukrainian women journalists who are burnt out. So that's why I started my project, The Breather, to help Ukrainian women journalists. But what I would like to use this opportunity and share my thoughts. We really need one more project for women journalists that would be called Focus, for them to focus on everything that is a mess right now in their lives. They've lost their homes. Most of these women have lost their homes. They don't have any idea how to take care of their bills, how to rent their apartments, how to make their children actually finish the year at school, because kids have been online, studying online since the beginning of the pandemic. And they just need time to focus. So I'm looking for help with this project. I would like to continue advocating for women journalists and helping women journalists in Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I could then leave the floor then to Wei Nu to lead us.
Thank you very much. I mean, in the world of atrocities and conflict that we're dealing with and continue to survive every day to make things progress, we cannot actually continue this work without hope, without being hopeful. And we have to instill this hope in ourselves. And I would say that's how I encourage my teams and other colleagues and people in Burma as well. We need to be hopeful regardless of the circumstances we are and experiences that we face. So, you know, for me, it's always about hope. And without hope, we cannot make change, or we cannot make progress. So hope is essential. But in the context of technology and women, I'm very, very hopeful as well, because I have seen how far, if women have access to technology, how far they can take things forward. Because often things come from women, and women organizations are very genuine, very honest, very raw, and reflective of the society's complex situations. And that is something often missing in the context of politics and conflict, often left by men, right? So I think that is why it is crucial that women's and women's organizations are access to enough adequate resources that can build their strength and their work and take their work farther, make it progress faster than as needed. So I echo calls from Sarah about supporting the local organizations, especially in conflicts affected areas where people often overlooked or where there is no access to $1 million. It is important to be able to provide a few $1,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 can make huge difference. And therefore, I think it is absolutely crucial for the donors, governments, and big INGOs to directly support the local organizations, especially women's organizations. And that's how we make things progress and take this to further step. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we have heard from all of you how vital technology is in providing agency and actions and ways that women can find the workarounds to figure out what they need and how they need to protect themselves. I mean, it uses for witnessing, for information sharing, for protection, for all of these things. But the most important thing I think that comes out of our discussion is not just the agency of women in these conditions, but our own agency and our own task to be part of this discussion and to find ways that we ourselves, through applying pressure or advocacy for better, against Facebook or whatever it is, that we also have agency in this. And that's, I think, a very, very important thought to end with. And I want to thank all of our speakers, Anna Nepsova, Sarah Wahedi, and of course, Wei Nu. And of course, to the Ambassador Sparba, thank you, and the Embassy of Liechtenstein for allowing us to give voice to all of these most extraordinary individuals. And we're very honored to have been part of this. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.